All right. Well, welcome everybody to the first podcast, Practice Corner podcast of the new year. Welcome to 2019. Somehow that happened. And here we are in a brand new year, first month of the year. And I have this lovely guest with me today, Danielle LaRock. Danielle, thanks for joining us and welcome.
Hi, it's great to be here.
Yes, I have had the pleasure of knowing Danielle in a multitude of spaces and arenas for, oh my gosh, this will be year 4, year 5. I don't know where we're at. We've known each other for a while. This seems to be a theme in my podcast. I have all these amazing clients and friends and colleagues inside the community. And they get in here and I realize, oh my gosh, I've known you in so many different facets of your life, which I love because that creates for a really good conversation. But we're also able to pull out more of that backstory and talk about, how you landed where you landed. So Danielle is joining us from Shepherdstown. Is that correct? Shepherdstown,
Yep. West Virginia.
West Virginia, thank you. Other side of the country for me. And I just think Danielle lives the most interesting life, which I have to remind her of constantly whenever she doubts herself or doesn't know. I'm like, girl, you live like the most interesting life. She's traveled all over the world. She has worked for nonprofits. She's done fundraising for social justice organizations. She owns a piece of property and has 2 tiny houses and an Airstream that are about to create something called Tiny Haven. I mean, just the most interesting thing. And she runs businesses and has dogs and lives an awesome life. So I feel like you're living the epitome of the entrepreneur who's like, you know what, I don't want to necessarily have roots, but I want to have roots all over that make an impact on the world. And I'm going to put myself out there and see what happens. So thank you for joining us. I think you're the perfect guest to kick off the new year because you take chances. And I think that's something that we have to speak to today. But I left a lot out. So tell us a little bit about what it is you're doing today, and then we'll go back and talk about how you got where you are.
You definitely know me really well because I think you summed it up really, really great. And sometimes it's even hard for me. And we've talked about this, how it's hard to talk about all of the things that you're doing or the thing that you do. And, yeah, I mean, I guess I realized, I feel like it was only recently that I realized, I think I had a family member say like, oh, you're an entrepreneur. You're just a little entrepreneur. And I was like, I guess I am. But I think really it's just, I find like doing kind of these different businesses, whether it's like running a training or coaching business or running Tiny Haven, I like being able to like make my own decisions and call my own shots and create what I want to create, and do so in a way that I can like bring other people into it. So I just find that to be really like fun, and it is risky, and sometimes I do doubt myself a lot, but it's overall been really worth it. And I like coming on like podcasts and shows like this because it helps remind me like where I'm at too. So it's good.
Yeah. Yeah. And I met Danielle in 2015 at a training, and we spent 14 days in this conference room, essentially 8 to 9 hours a day. It was super intense and fun, and also fun in a like sick, twisted way, because that's what we do, right? As self-development junkies, like we can dig in and do hard work for 2 weeks, which is not normal. But that's where I met Danielle. And I remember thinking there's something really intriguing about you, because you do have this ability to say, I want to go experience X, so I'm going to go do that now. And tell us a little bit about just in the last, I mean, you can take us back as far as you want, but even just in the last decade, all the places that you have been and how that has impacted the choices you're making now about what you want to do with Tiny Haven and the work around change leadership that we're going to get into in a little bit.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. The last decade, that's like, I mean, it's a big, I feel like that's been a big time for me. I feel like when I was in college, that was kind of what changed a lot of my perspective for me, because I, went to Tulane, which is in New Orleans, and my move-in weekend was Hurricane Katrina. So like I saw everything that happened from that, both and afterwards kind of learning more about like the environmental impacts and how like if there were more wetlands, it wouldn't have been as bad. If we had built the levees different, it wouldn't have been as bad. And then just also all of the like social impacts, the people who are really just disenfranchised who ended up getting hit hardest. And then that's what I ended up studying in school. And so I guess I just got really into like wanting to change the world when I was in school. And then I kind of got out into like the real world and was working with the federal government. And I was doing like course development, leading trainings, doing that type of thing. It was all around climate change. So it was like on paper, it like seemed like, okay, cool, I am like saving the world. And I know that what I did was beneficial, but I just kind of started feeling restless and like it wasn't a good fit for me. So I left. And then I really didn't have an exact plan of what I was doing. I just knew that I wanted to help people. And that was when I kind of got into more like self-development and learning about myself. And so I wanted to just immerse myself in that. And so I spent 6 months and I went to Thailand and Cambodia and India. And it was a really like life-changing trip for me to go and do something like that. And in retrospect, like some people were like, weren't you scared? Because I like went by myself. But the thing that I've always noticed is when I go and do things, there's always other people going and doing them too. Like, unless like you have to like really try to do stuff by yourself. Like, so, yeah, I feel like, the thing that I've seen a lot in my travels is this theme of like community. I really like connecting with people. Like I like connecting with people one-on-one, like in depth, but I also like connecting with people like in a group. And so I feel like all of my experiences, like I think it was in 2017, I went and I hiked a portion of the Appalachian Trail. And it was kind of the same thing was coming up. Like I kind of went out there to try to be by myself, but just ended up realizing that like we all need each other. So I feel like that just seems to be a common theme in what I'm doing and everything that's kind of going on with both of my businesses, both like my service kind of training business and then also Tiny Haven, which is the tiny house business. They're both kind of focused on community and working together.
Yeah, I don't want to gloss over this though, because I can't imagine being 18, going to college. We're already oriented towards helping people, wanting to change the world, right? I remember going to school and being like, I'm going to be the victor of the underdog and I'm going to go into social work and I'm going to change the system. And then come to find out like it's an unchangeable system and that's why it exists. And I can't imagine being 18, landing in Louisiana, landing in New Orleans, the moment Hurricane Katrina hits, and then we're still dealing as a country, I think, with the ramifications, but also the realities, what was going on in that city before the hurricane, and then watching the unfolding of it. And I can imagine that that had such an influence on where you chose to focus your time and energy at such a pertinent time. I mean, you're young, you feel like we have all that energy. We feel we're not jaded yet by what's possible and how far we could reach, which is important because we need those. Those are the foundational years that I think, at least for me, helped me determine what am I up against and am I willing to move up against it? And where do I belong in this bigger story and in this bigger experience, and where do I want to put myself? So can you speak a little bit to like how that affected you both, personally, but also how it continues to be a strand in your life?
Yeah, I think the biggest way it affected me is I grew up in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., like, which by suburbs, I mean, like, I went to like one of the top 50 public high schools in the country. Like there was a shit ton of money around me at all times. Like I didn't even really understand like what anybody in a difficult situation like that was going through. And so I feel like Hurricane Katrina really just opened my eyes to like that there's just a lot of like challenges in the world, and that there's a lot of the systems that I thought that I think when you're younger, maybe you, at least for me, I thought, oh, the government, takes care of people. It does these things, whatever. And then you like kind of start to look at things and you're like, well, like all of these things are run by people, and people are doing the best that they can. But like sometimes there's just stuff that doesn't, our biases can affect how we're treating each other. And so that, I think, was the biggest thing that I saw, was like people's houses just like blown apart. And most of these people who were affected were in lower income areas. And I actually went back to Louisiana for grad school, and I studied the impacts of Hurricane Katrina on like people with different socioeconomic status. And that was there's definitely a correlation. Like people who are more disenfranchised get hit harder by not just natural disasters, just by life, like by stuff happening. And I feel like the thing that it keeps coming back to me is I don't feel like we can keep moving forward and say we're like changing the world if we're not including everyone.
Yeah. As an entrepreneur, and this is a really meta question and we can chunk this down, but as an entrepreneur and as a business owner, what has been the component of social awareness, let alone social justice, which is a whole other conversation, that you feel responsible to stay in contact with as you grow your business?
Yeah. As far like, so you're asking what the component of social awareness that I feel like I need to stay in touch with?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I feel like I have a belief that everyone can make a difference and that everyone has a purpose, and that I don't think that anybody is a lost cause, or that we can that we can push these things aside. But I think it's also, I also believe in like boundaries and accountability. And I feel like the thing that I like about business is that it has, like you can incorporate both. Like you can have a business that does like social good or environmental good, or both. That it doesn't have to be one or the other.
Yeah. So you believe it can be both and.
Yeah. And I think it took me a while to like get to that point, because I kind of like, I went into sort of like the public sector, like that was what I was in. And then I left and I kind of went into, I was like, I'm going to focus on me and myself and my business and my stuff. But then I was starting to feel like restless there too. I felt like I left something behind a little bit. And so I think for me, it's just been like incorporating like all of the different facets, even though it's like you think that they, like, I think sometimes we think that those things that we like, that they seem like they're conflicting. They actually can go together. It's like just sort of like a Rubik's Cube or something like that, just figuring out how you want to put them together.
Yeah, speak to that a little bit, because that, I think a lot of our members feel that, and I've certainly experienced that, where I don't know how something's going to fit, even if I feel called to get interested in it or bring it into my business or just bring it into my life, or even thinking about why would I go down that path when I've been in something completely opposite? How does that ever gonna, come together or create some like linear passageway, which we think it's supposed to be X and Y then Z, and it doesn't really work that way. But how have you come to a place of realizing all of this enmeshes in the same direction?
Yeah, I think the good thing is that I feel like as long as you're paying attention and your eyes are open, like life is just gonna keep showing it to you over and over and over again. Like it, and I feel like a lot of, like, for me, I feel like it was kind of this concept of like, well, I want to like do this really huge, like, as you said, like meta thing, like changing the world. Like I'm like fascinated by like change leadership and like all of these things. But then I also want to create something that is like tangible and like that is really able to like help people in that sense. And so I feel like what kept happening for me is every time I would go, like I would think, okay, I'm going to leave this thing behind and I'm going to go to something else. Like somehow it would kind of catch up with me. And for me, and I'm probably still missing stuff, but, for me, the common theme that I keep seeing is like training and community. And so I started being like I would leave the training world and I would try to do something else. And then I would like get back, like someone would be like, oh, can you like develop like this training, or can you like work on this like training for us or whatever? And so I started to just be like, okay, I think that this is kind of a sign or a theme or whatever. And so I think those are things to listen to. And like sometimes I think that you just have to let it like percolate a little bit, because I'm the type of person who like I just want things to like fit and work like right away.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's okay if they don't. Like you can just let it like sit there, and it doesn't, even if something calls to you, you don't have to put it in your business right away. Sometimes it ends up having a different place. Like for me, the word haven kept coming up again and again and again. I kept trying to make that my coaching and my service oriented business. But then when I was able to like take that out and put it like in this tiny home community and focus on like that's that business, then it gave me so much more room in my training business to be able to focus on that. So sometimes things do go together, but they don't go together in the same pot, like ice cream and ketchup. I don't know.
They're both equally good.
Yeah.
But they don't have to mesh.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see a lot of business owners, when it doesn't all fit together, they go to take something away completely, or they keep themselves from indulging or enjoying something that clearly has meaning or matters to them, or they throw all of it out and start all over again. And I'm curious if you'd be willing to speak to this, and it's a little, I have an unfair advantage because I know you so well and I've coached you and I know some of the ebbs and flows you've had in your business, but I also watched you this year ground into something with a lot of, I want to say resiliency. And I think you came to a place and said, you know what? I'm clearly not quitting. I'm clearly meant to have something of my own. I'm clearly meant to help people. That's not going away. So I need to find my way and navigate through this differently. And you did. You completely 180'd on everything you had been doing. And I'm speaking kind of broad, and I want you to fill in the details of what you were attempting to build even just a year ago, maybe not even quite a year ago, 9 months ago. And then this huge pivot you took and where you've landed at the end of the year.
Yeah, it's so weird because even though it's 2019 now, when it was 2018, I would almost think of the beginning of 2018 as a different year. Like I always wanted to be like last year, but it was like, I was like, it wasn't like that was just the same year. So I feel like when I first started creating I don't know, like the transformation or coaching type of business, like I feel like a lot of us can appreciate this. Like when you like feel so like awake and lit up and you just like want to help other people, like that's all I wanted to do. And so like, I feel like I was kind of creating this big thing, but it wasn't very specific and it wasn't very niched, and it didn't have a lot of like structure to it. But it was still like, I was still kind of getting like some like little successes. Like I ran this retreat that I really, really loved. And I was like, okay, like I could do this like every day. But then I was kind of trying to, continue to evolve it over a period of time. And then what I ended up doing was I tried to niche myself, like almost like so much, like I was like, oh, this person's doing this thing that I like, and this person's doing this thing, and then I'm interested in this thing, so I'm going to put it all together. And I kind of put myself out there as like, not a healer, but as somebody who I, was like, okay, you can heal yourself, because I had dealt with a lot of physical stuff with my body. And so I was like, well, maybe this is just how I need to get started. And then all of that big stuff, like all of these big ideas that I have and all this community stuff and whatever, can just wait. Like, can wait till later. Like, I need to be successful first before I can do that. Like, I feel like that's such a common theme that I have heard with my clients as well, as like, oh, well, I need to do this thing first before I can do the thing that I really want to do. And I feel like, at least for me, that's never, ever worked. And it just ends up taking so much more energy rather than just focusing on the thing that I was really interested in wholly. So I feel like I created something that wasn't completely, it wasn't not me. Like it was kind of me, but it felt very contrived.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't do it anymore. And so and then I was just getting really frustrated with like just the whole system. And then that was when all this stuff was coming up for me around, like, I want to help heal poverty in the world. And I was like, what the heck am I, like, where is that coming from? And how does that fit in like a coaching business? And so I just like threw up my hands. I was like, fuck it. I left. I ended up going to we have a cabin in Vermont that's on Lake Champlain. There's no electricity or plumbing. It's just, my family has like other cabins along there. It's just like kind of like a little commune thing. So I just hung out there for like the summer and really didn't do much of anything. And then it was sort of like the end of the summer, all of a sudden I was just like, okay, I'm going to go buy an Airstream trailer, get someone to contract me to build a tiny house. Cause I've been, and that wasn't a completely impulsive decision. I had been looking at tiny homes for like a while, for at least a year. I had been looking at them. I was like, oh, this would be really cute. Like, I really like the idea. We could rent it out, blah, blah, blah. My boyfriend and I were talking about it. And then I just decided, I was like, I'm just going to go and do it. Like, cause it's always like this thing where we think we need more money, more this, more that, but like, and I just started to realize, I was like, I think I have just enough to at least get this started.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I did. I bought this Airstream in California and drove it back to West Virginia. And then, we have one tiny house that's almost finished being built. And then we bought another one that a guy in Louisiana actually built. So we went down and got that. So we've been driving around. I think I've actually been in all four corners of the country in the last 3 months. I realized.
Which doesn't surprise me. There was a month there at the end of the summer. I remember every week getting on the phone with you and saying, where are you? What state are you in? And we get these pictures of you with the truck and the Airstream and your dog. And I thought, oh my gosh, this woman has courage to go across the country and pick up this thing and just say, this is what I'm doing now. And it isn't coming from this flighty, I'm just going to be impulsive. It's what happens when I actually listen to the thing that has been nagging at me for so long? Where does the energy come from? Because then all of a sudden you were creating something that had clearly meant a lot to you, that you had been pushing aside to make space for other people's ideas of success for a really long time. And as soon as you made that choice, I saw things fall into place in weeks that took you years to wrap yourself around before.
Yeah. I mean, cause ever since we met, all I've wanted to do is basically create this like retreat, like school, like a center, like a school for like change leaders. Like that's what I wanted to do. It just seemed like such a massive thing. And for the longest time, I thought I needed to be like Essalon or some like big shit like that. And now it's so funny. I find it kind of ironic that I'm like, oh, tiny houses, just like tiny. And like we did buy 6 acres. Like 6 acres is, big or small depending on what you compare it to. But I think that's the thing. Sometimes you think that you need this huge, like you think you need 50 acres. If I had 50 acres right now, my head would explode. I am so glad that I don't have so much. Like, I think the thing I like about maybe where I'm at now is I like this motto of I have everything I need
Mm.
and I need everything I have. So
Mm.
like not only outside, but inside, like I need everything I have inside, but I have it already. And, um, so yeah, I just feel like the idea of like building this thing, it took me 4 years to finally kind of, I feel like, take that particular step, and then everything happened very quickly. But I think those 4 years were also somewhat necessary to like figure out some things along the way too.
Yeah. I mean, what did you learn in those 4 years that you couldn't imagine doing this next phase of your business if you hadn't learned those things?
I think that I learned how to take ideas and make them like actionable or implement. I think for me, I'm a really big picture thinker. I
Mm.
have to know why. Like, if there's not a why, I will lose steam really fast. And so I think that I had to try and experiment with several things. And like, it was almost just like picking up rocks, being like, is this it? And then like, no, like, that's not it. Like, is this it? No, that's not it. And it's just like, but sometimes I think you have to give yourself permission to try the things. So it's kind of funny because I feel like I tell people like, okay, go for the thing that you really want. And I do believe that. And also give yourself permission to try the things along the way, because it's going to change and it's going to evolve anyway. Um, I think the biggest thing is I just wasn't ready for like the responsibility of like what I'm doing right now. Like what
Mm.
I'm doing right now is already like stretching me pretty hardcore. And I'm really glad I have my partner Jonathan helping me. Cause it's just, there's things like building stuff, like electricity, you don't build electricity, but getting electricity on a property, all this,
Yeah.
there's just stuff that I'm not as like, I don't really understand it as well. But I think I've, over the last 4 years, I think I've learned a little bit more how to trust myself.
Mm.
I think that's really the main thing. And it doesn't need to take so long to
Yeah.
to trust yourself, but I think that I needed to really believe that I could do it.
Yeah. I think it's huge being able to trust ourselves, especially in work. And even if, like you said, when you went to Thailand and India and Cambodia and you were going alone, but there's a lot of people going alone. And in that, you're going together. And I feel that way about being an entrepreneur or being a business owner, that I'm going at this alone, but we're all doing it alone. And that's where the community sort of contains and self creates itself. But there are a lot of days where, I mean, every day you still wake up in your own head, in your own body, in your own office, in your own thoughts, in your own desires and dreams and ambitions and fears and hesitations. And even with the most well-intended and loving and nurturing community, we have to contend with our own doubts, and we have to contend with our own risk and willingness to go forward on these ideas. And so I think what you're saying is massive. That trust is, at least for me too, trust has been that bridge between what I know I want to do and actually doing the thing I want to do. And then letting myself rise into it, because I can set ambitions and goals that I'm not built for yet. But I trust that maybe in moving toward those things, I will grow into what I need to grow into for those things to become my reality.
Yeah. And I'm realizing that too, like my whole idea of like running a retreat center, like that's not run by just one person, or like a school is not run by just one person. So like the thing that has like really been hitting me in the face is like delegation. And I have struggled with it, and I didn't realize how much of a perfectionist I am. And I'm like, oh, well, I can do this better. So like, I'm going to do everything. But at the same time, I'm like screaming out for help. I'm like, this is kind of silly. So like, that's kind of what I'm wrangling with there. And then I've just kind of realized, I'm like, you know what? Like, it's just okay to be where you're at.
Mm.
And right now, like I have a ton of like, just a ton invested in infrastructure, and like this hasn't taken off yet. And so there's also this like just being able, I think it took me 4 years to be like, I found something that I'm sticking with. And I think the evolution of my like coaching, which is kind of moving more into like training and like group oriented work. And then like Tiny Haven, like is like this is what I kind of see as like my home, or as like the beginnings of this like school, I guess, to some extent. I feel like it just took me a long time to feel like this is it. I'm committed. I'm following through with it. Because if you don't have the follow through, like all the motivation in the world isn't really gonna help you.
Yep, totally agree. I was just saying to someone else earlier today that I find it's not the most brilliant people that succeed. That there are a lot of brilliantly successful people, and there are a lot of successful people that I would question their brilliance. And if we look at their track record, you'll find that they just went the mile further than the person who maybe had more to say or more to offer, but wasn't willing to go or didn't know how to go, or if that makes sense. Like there's this ability to stick to it that isn't comfortable, and it's not very pretty, and it's kind of boring and gritty and doesn't always feel inspired. And yet it's that consistency that is required for our ideas to get enough momentum that people can actually get access to them.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting too, because I've been learning more about like different personality types and things like that. Like my partner has a very different personality than I do. And so like literally even just like communicating on like a day-to-day basis is like it can be really challenging because of the way that we approach things. And so I think I've also just learned that knowing, like, a lot of times I think we need to know more. Like we need to know, and it is really important to build skills. But I feel like building skills is different than just like layering a bunch of stuff on top of you and being like, okay, this can protect me from like being vulnerable now because I have all of this like certifications or et cetera, et cetera. Or I have all these like pieces of paper that like indicate that like I'm good at this. And I think I've just realized that it's knowing yourself is like the key thing to like keep moving forward. Because if you know how you operate, then like, and you know where you struggle, like you can, like, you're going to be able to like figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think we give ourselves enough time to figure it out. You know, I think we, like you said, we want it now. And yet if you had 50 acres and this entire retreat space up and running, your head would fall off because we haven't given ourselves the space to become the thing that we're called to. Yeah. Okay, tell me about Tiny Haven. I want you to share about what it is,
I know, and
what it's going to be.
It's actually funny because when I was like, oh, okay, like let's do like the podcast, I was like, well, maybe it'll like be like in the spring, and I was like, oh no, it's in January. Okay, this is just the time it's supposed to be. So I'm not in the tiny house right now. We actually live in a very small apartment in Shepherdstown right now. We actually moved out of our main house. I live in like a 400 square foot apartment, and I like, side note, I also think it's interesting, and I think I just want to tell people that like you don't have to have like, I don't know, like crazy like watches or like live in like this beautiful space to like be a change leader. For so long I thought that like I needed to look a certain way or act a certain way or dress a certain way or whatever, and like now I just realized I really like being able to do work where I can like wear a t-shirt and like yoga pants or jeans and not like freaking worry about it. Anyways, so Tiny Haven, so we have a 30-foot Airstream trailer, which is one of those like silver ones. It kind of looks like a bullet. And we have 2 tiny homes. They're tiny houses on wheels. So you can tow them with a truck, depending on how heavy they are. And the 2 that we have are 8.5 feet wide by 20 feet long. So basically their footprint is 160 square feet, and then they each have a loft. So they're about 200 square feet of living space.
Okay.
Yes.
They're so little.
They're really little.
They don't call it tiny house for nothing.
Yeah, they're really cute. And it's funny because like the Airstream is the first one that I got, and I got that set up, and it's on Airbnb. But it's just funny because there's just a lot of like frustration with like when you're working on projects. And so I've just noticed that when I'm really frustrated, I call it the Airstream when I'm really like happy about it, and I call it a trailer when I'm like not. And I don't know I haven't really had to deal with it with the tiny houses yet, but I don't know. They don't really have alternate names, but
I love it.
yeah. So it's been really interesting, and so we're still in the process of getting like our utilities set up and getting everything hooked up. But really, at first, we're just going to rent them on Airbnb or maybe to some people like in our community. Mm-hmm. But long term, I'd love to be able to like host some like retreat style learning there. Eventually maybe get a few more, because I just really like if you're going somewhere to learn something, like that you have your own like nice little space.
I know, I can see it, the vision, having all these small houses and Airstreams and getting to come for retreat style change leadership and development, and then staying in your tiny house, which is kind of awesome. Like, let's take retreat learning to a whole new level by giving you your own little tiny home. And where is the property? So those who are listening can look into it.
It's in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. So I also live in a town that has like 2,000 people. It's a really tiny town, but it's we're an hour and a half from Washington, D.C. So we're very close to Maryland and the Potomac River. We're right on the river. And the property is only like 4 miles from downtown Shepherdstown. So it's just like, it's a place that a lot of people from DC like to come and like hang out and like just kind of get, it's definitely like small town, historic, kind of like a funky vibe. We at one point had 2 yoga studios, even though our town is so small. So it's great. And I'm still in the process. That's one of the, like, I just have like this to-do list that's like, so like, but one of the things is, website. So we don't have the website up yet, but we are on Instagram, so you can see pictures of everything.
Yeah, and I'll post I'll put in the show notes your the Instagram handle, and if the Airstream is listed, I can put that in there for anyone who's visiting that area. I'm tempted to get on a plane just to see it. You're very far from me, but just the concept is so cool.
It's great. And the Airstream right now is actually in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, because that's where one of our tiny houses is getting built there, and they have a little farm. So they're all set up and they have electricity. And
love it.
Water and all that. So that's just where it is, at least right now, but it eventually will come home with the others.
Yeah. Talk about the learning curve of moving into this, because going from something that was time and service based only, so coaching, even working on curriculum, teaching people course development, is very much you just sell your time. This is an entirely different capacity, right? There's houses and property and things like, how do you hook up plumbing and how do you handle electricity on a piece of raw land? And talk about the threshold of developing a business in an industry that's completely brand new to you. Yeah,
I think the coolest thing about it is that once you learn certain skills, like you can apply them in different areas. And so like being able to like hold space for people and like run, like work with a group of people or like run a training, like that takes a certain level of like calmness, I guess, like, or centeredness, ability to be in a centered place that I sometimes forget when I'm working on like infrastructure type stuff. But the same things apply. Like you can, the person you're being can translate in both ways. It's not so much what you're doing. Like, and I feel like when I am being the person that I want to be, which is, I feel like being like centered and authentic and like having good boundaries and being, good at delegation or just being good at like implementing things. Then I feel like it actually is pretty straightforward to like figure things out. Like it's like, oh, we need a permit for this. Like, let's just go figure out what that is. Or like, oh, like, this, we don't really fall into this business license category. So like, where do we fall into? So I think it's, the learning curve really has just been being okay, not knowing the answer, and just knowing that you're going to figure out the answer as you go.
Yeah. I wish more people would approach their work like that, from this place of just curiosity, but also, well, it has to get done. So what don't I know, and who might know it, and how can I figure it out? And trust that you will figure, like, eventually you're going to figure it out, because someone's done it and someone's put it out there on the web and someone's created even a tutorial. There's probably even a video about it. Like, you're going to figure it out, but you have to ask the question.
Like, Google is great. And I think that's also another skill, like knowing what to Google, because like at one point, like the electricity wasn't working in the Airstream. And it was like, why not? It was like, we ended up having to Google like 12-volt appliances are not working. I was like, oh, it's because of the battery. Like, because that's what, so like, I've just been learning like random things that like I never thought I would learn. But I think being able to like approach things and not place limitations on yourself just because you haven't done it before, because you're going to have to learn something at some point. So even if you haven't done something, just like do some research, like it might be a little trial and error, like, or, talk to somebody who has done it. And it's kind of interesting, like even people who have done it, they don't always know all the answers either. Sometimes it's just, you got to figure it out by experience. So I think that is what seems to work well for me most of the time. Although sometimes I do, even though I think I have a high risk tolerance, I think sometimes like the uncertainty can get to me too. So I think it's also important to just acknowledge your fears and acknowledge that they're there, and that they're, the things are coming up for a reason. So I don't think they need to get pushed aside either.
Yeah, absolutely. No one who was successful was originally successful, right? We all have to grow into it. And that growth piece is not always going to be fun. And sometimes it's simple. How do I Google how to get electricity in my Airstream? And sometimes it's more complex. Like, how do I contend with trusting that I'm enough? How do I lean into this, even though it's going to require something that I don't even know how to give or do or be or trust in fully? And I think it comes back to, what am I doing this for? And what is this thing I feel I have not only conviction for, but almost this sense of ethical responsibility to respond to, even when I don't want to? I know I have days where I just feel like, oh, I just don't even know where to begin. I don't even know if what I'm doing is making a lick of difference. I don't even know how to measure it. And those are not the days to take action on. Those are the days to be really gracious to yourself and take a step back. And the days where you feel like, I remember why I'm doing this, those are the days to move forward and the days to act from. So tell us about your other business, because that's only half the puzzle. So you have Tiny Haven, and then you have your own website and domain, and your own work you're doing there with what you call change agents and change leaders. But I want to hear in your own words what that work is about and what you're excited to do with it this year.
Yeah. Well, this has been sort of a recent evolution. I really put everything down this summer because I just needed that break, and I was able to take it. And I was able to take it because I was renting things, like I was renting my house out and everything like that. And so that's kind of where the Tiny Haven idea came into play. I was like, I would really like to have this other stream of income. Mm-hmm. So then I put it down, not even knowing if I was going to pick it up again. But actually in the process of like developing Tiny Haven, most people are like super excited and super into it. But there are people who are a little bit more hesitant, or like they don't understand it. And one of the things that I wanted, that I'm interested in doing with Tiny Haven, is actually employing former, like people who have a conviction on their record, because Jonathan, my partner, he was in prison for 5 years, and it's been really challenging for him. Like if he does lose a job, like he's pretty much just had to find stuff with people he knows. Like he can't work for like most organizations or businesses or whatever. And so I'm referring to this story because someone kind of brought up something about Jonathan and former convicts and things like that. And I just started to realize, I was like, you know what, like, fuck it. Like, I really think that the world like needs more, like it needs more space for people to come together who have ideas about changing these systems. And what a social entrepreneur does is they take direct action and they change a system. So they're not just making a system better or like, just kind of putting a Band-Aid on it. They're actually creating a new alternative. So my training business is, I started to realize that I want to get back into training and to helping change makers be able to make the kind of difference that they want to make. And I feel like that is sort of a twofold thing, both like I said before, knowing yourself and like understanding who you are. And then also having really it's threefold: having the skills, and being able to build those skills, and then having that supportive community. I feel like all three things kind of go well together to support people in that. And so I'm in the process of developing training programs that I am really interested in doing live, like through video and in person, because I really like that kind of personal connection. And so right now, this is me being like curious, and I don't know if it's going to work. And it is really scary because we have so much invested in Tiny Haven. And we have, we're at the point now where I'm just like, I've got to like create something of value for other people. And these are the people that I love working with. And this is the type of thing that I really love doing. And I feel like I can put it all together in a way that does create that space for people to be able to evolve their ideas and their projects and their businesses, or like not their nonprofit organization, in such a way where they feel like they really are seeing that difference that they want to make.
I know it would be more convenient to have this interview in the spring when things are solidified and put together and the website's up and everything's working. And for a minute I was like, oh, we should like postpone this and do it in a few months. But I love this. Obviously, this is me, and I love the messy middle because it's where most of us hang out most of the time, but we never talk about it. And we certainly don't talk about it in the midst of it. And I love that people can follow your process. And I know you have a new community. You've got this great new website. You're working on getting Tiny Haven, which requires massive infrastructure to get up and running. And that's going to evolve over the next few years. And I just love this idea that we're talking about the very beginnings of something. You're seasoned in the sense that you know your strengths, you take risks, you know what value you offer, you know what you love and what you continue to come back to. And yet you're at this great transitional point where you're saying, I'm going to stick to this. Here's what I'm doing going forward. I don't know if it's going to work, but I feel compelled to try. And that is where a lot of us come to in our work time and time and time again. And we never pause to say, oh my gosh, like I'm doing this really amazing radical thing, and I'm not giving myself 2 cents to really consider how powerful that is and hard and courageous it is at the same time. And we know you could go out and get a job. We've talked about it. You could go work for a nonprofit. You could go work as a freelancer or contractor. And yet there's this seed, and I think that's for all of our members too, this seed of, but I have to try it in this way. I know I personally have something I have to offer and I have to leave here. And if I don't leave it here, I will be unfinished. And that's the call. And that's the call that, we don't always choose. And sometimes we don't want it. And yet, it's there for a reason.
Yeah. And I love what you and Christine have been sharing about the performance goals versus mastery goals. And I've realized that when I have had really good success, it's because I'm focused on the process and not so much on the outcome. Like, I know the outcome that I want, but the process is really what's important. And if I'm committed to the process, then like, that's when if you're committed to the process, you won't give up on it. Mm-hmm. And so, that's sort of where I feel like I'm at. I'm like kind of at the beginning of creating something, but I feel like I'm finally at this place where I feel like I'm creating something that I'm just sticking with it. And it feels really good. So even though like things are challenging and we all have our days, like it kind of makes it easier when like, oh, well, I'm stuck with this thing. So keep going.
Yep. It's here. So what are we going to do about it? Yes. Well, for any of our members listening or watching this in this new month, this new year of 2019, do you have any advice based on where you are currently in your business for anyone else who might be in a similar place as you?
Yeah. I feel like it's okay to just focus on building the foundation. Like, it doesn't have to be totally put together. So be okay, I guess, in that messy middle. The other thing I was thinking is like, sometimes I think that when we go through these things and we're doing things that really matter to us, that we all want to change the world in some way, is to not get jaded. Because I feel like when you get jaded, like you've already lost it. And I have gotten jaded before, and it took me a little while, I feel like, to work through that. And sometimes that happens, but I feel like if you just continue to like hold your vision, then other people are going to get on board. But like, you can't wait for other people to kind of fight for your cause. Like, you've got to be the one who does it.
I love that. Yeah. You cannot wait for other people to fight for your cause. That's good advice. Awesome. Thank you, Danielle. Where can people find you out in the interwebs?
In the interwebs, DanielleLaRock.com. So my last name is spelled like it sounds, LaRock. And then eventually there will be a website for Tiny Haven. It will be tinyhavenwv.com. So that's West Virginia. Tiny Haven, West Virginia.
Great. Okay. I'll put it in there with a little coming soon.
Okay. Yes. And the tiny houses are under construction right now.
Under construction. I love it. And literally they're being built as we speak, which is so fantastic. Awesome. Thank you so much, Danielle. And you also have a community. So for any of us who I'm in there that you feel like, hey, you know what, that's me. I'm a change agent. I'm doing this wild, crazy thing I feel called to do to help other people. Where are my people? I will put a link to that community down below so they can join that as well.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, fantastic. And if anyone wants to have a conversation or reach out to you personally, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
My email is just Danielle@DanielleLaRock.com. So you can reach out to me there. And I'm going to be doing some things in the next few months to actually kind of have like a official space for people to kind of come in and like have a conversation type of thing. But I'm always willing to help people. Like even if you just have like a question I can answer through email, I can do that too.
Fantastic. Awesome. Thank you so much, Danielle. You have a lovely start to your year. I say rest of your year, but we've got 363 days to go. So have a fantastic 2019, and we'll see you around the community. And thank you guys for joining us. We'll see you next month.
All right. Thanks, Andrea.
Yep. Bye.